Hey everybody, it is 4:58 and we are ready to start. I'm Karen, and I have a wonderful Vice President and Big right here. And we have members from SPJ, and I am introducing Mr. Juan Conde. Mr. Conde is a Richmond broadcaster with 32 years of experience in radio and television. The main anchor at 8 News for 22 years, after logging 10 years as an announcer for WCXFM.
Hour 92.
He also has experience as an on-camera and voiceover talent for commercial and industrial production. He's a native of Brooklyn, New York, and he attended college at William and Mary and BCU.
Thank you, Jen. I'm glad I rewrote my bio because the old one was inappropriate. It's much better.
I'm Rob Crocker. I am a adjunct here. I do see a couple of my students in here. I'm also a PhD student at the MATX program here at BC. That's the Media, Art, and Text program. And we also have our vice president of the NABJ chapter here at BC, which is restarted. Angelique.
Hi, I'm Angelique James. Like Rob said, and Karen, I'm the vice president of NABJ. And I'm just excited to be here.
And of course, we have Juan Conde, who is one of my former colleagues back when I was in news, way back when, and I have since moved on. And Juan, of course, moved on a couple of weeks ago. You did your last broadcast with WRIC here in Richmond, Virginia.
2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, Tuesday.
Thank you very much, Alex. So Juan, you did your last broadcast.
Yeah.
I want to ask you a quick question about how's the media landscape in Richmond changed over the years for you? And what are the changes?
There's so many things. 22 years is a long time. How many of you guys are not far from 22 years old? Right? Exactly. Everybody, just about. So it's changed in a way, on a very parallel track, the way our world has changed in the last 22 years, or as you guys would say, the world has been, because that's all you know, right? Specifically that there is much more time devoted in local television to local news, to the detriment, unfortunately, as far as I'm concerned, of the quality. Because when I started 22 years ago, I was the evening anchor, right? So I go into I work the second shift. I go into 2 o'clock, 2:30, get out at midnight. Back then, though, we did a 6 o'clock show and an 11 o'clock show, and they were excellent. These days, that's double for me. So we do a 5 o'clock, a 5:30, a 6, and an 11. In addition to that, the morning show, which was of more modest length when I began, also increased in time. So they start at 4:30 in the morning, man. 4:30 in the morning, they start the news, and it runs intermittently through about noon, with some breaks in there for syndicated stuff and I'm selling things. So the biggest change is that more time is devoted to news. As I mentioned, I think this is the detriment of the product, because is there that much more news in Richmond to be had? Not really. Here's I thought about this the other day. If you think about news as an equation, I'm not good at math, but I thought this up, right? So news is equal to events divided by time. And if you spend more time covering these events, the value of that fraction decreases, right? Your denominator gets bigger, the piece gets smaller. And that's not good. Also, the things that we cover, having more time forces you to cover things that don't matter. If you cover more things that don't matter, you trivialize what's important and do the opposite for what's trivial.
Okay. I wanted to ask about your journey through all of it, starting in college. Did you major in broadcast, and how did you get started?
Oh man, this is so embarrassing. How do I say this? Okay. I went to college at William and Mary out of school, majored in drinking, lasted 3 semesters. I went home, I licked my wounds. I got a couple of BS jobs doing this and that. My younger brother was going to BCU at the time. So I moved from Alexandria, where we went to high school, here to Richmond to come to BCU. And I enrolled as a special student, took a couple of classes. with the idea of getting my degree. But within about 10 months of being here in town, I got a job working in radio. And that happened because I was working at a restaurant and somebody was like, hey, you got a good voice. You ever think about working in the radio? And I was like, I most certainly have. And he gave me a job and I ran with that. And while I was in the radio business, I realized that people were doing commercials and making money that way. So I took acting classes. So I had some kind of basic resume for on-camera stuff and acting. And then shot that to agents here in town with a headshot, and they gave me commercial jobs. The best commercial job I ever did was for Circuit City, an old electronics retailer similar to Best Buy, right? Circuit City was the Best Buy of yesterday. And I did a national spot with them. I ran across Thanksgiving and the Bahamas, and it was pretty good gig. So I fell very much into television news the same way. God, I was hustling back then. So during the time that I was in radio and doing the commercial stuff, I represented my radio station at Channel 8 for a UNCF telethon, United Negro College Fund telethon. And at the telethon, one of the guys there, an executive producer by the name of John Wolf, one of many people who's helped me along the way, was like, hey, you're pretty good at this. You ever think about working in TV? And I was like, I sure have. And he gave me a job doing weekend weather. And weekend weather is, back then, was a job that you didn't have to have any qualifications for. You didn't have to be a meteorologist. As long as you could talk on your feet for as long as they needed you to, and you could do graphics on a map, basic graphics now. We're not talking about heavy graphics. Like almost that I had, the sun was almost like a piece of felt that I stuck on a board. It was that long ago. But they let me do that. So the key message for you in that is that taking that weekend job required me to work 7 days a week because I already had my regular Monday through Friday radio job, right? But who could turn that down? It was crazy. It was a crazy opportunity. So I did that about a year. I wanted to quit. They wanted to keep me. They agreed to move me from doing weekend weather to like entertainment reporting night side. So I would do my morning radio show, get off about noon, go home, change, and then go to the TV station and work until midnight. So instead of doing 7 days, I'd do 5 20-hour days. And that was lousy too. Because I'd come home Friday night, I'd be exhausted. I'd wake up Saturday late, do some laundry, maybe see some friends, and then wake up Sunday morning with dread because it was about to start again. I left all that in the mid-90s and focused on radio. But by 99, I got tired of doing radio because I was getting a little bit older. And it's a young person's game. You know, you're hanging out in clubs and the hit music I was playing 10 years before wasn't the same music that I was playing, now or at that time. So I was going to get a job in real estate. I figured that was the best way to parlay the notoriety they had on radio into something that I could make money with in the streets. So I went to go get a real estate license, and then Channel 8 came to me out of the blue and was like, hey, do you want to anchor the news with Lisa Schaffner? And I was like, sure, okay. Because I was desperately underqualified. I didn't really have any formal journalistic training. I had on-air training. I could read well enough. So I figured what would happen is that I get the job and they fire me within the 3 years of my contract. But all I will have done was put my face on TV for as long as they let me, and then I'd go sell houses. And that 3-year contract turned into 22 years.
You just mentioned Lisa, and my first stint at 8, I was an intern there. I worked with you, Lisa.
Yeah.
And that's a sad note because Lisa just recently passed away. Can you share a memory of Lisa really quick?
Wow. Lisa Schaffner taught me, she taught me things she didn't mean to, I think. Lisa was like me in that she kind of came from a place where she was not privileged. She grew up in rural Ohio and kind of created herself. She was a woman who made herself into who she was. And that's what she did every day. So she taught me how to be that person, and then also the limitations and the downfalls of being sort of that person. She was really, really, really community oriented, and I learned that from her. And then some things that that I shied away from later, particularly saving private time for myself. I don't want to be on all the time. And when you're a TV news anchor, if you're a reporter here in town, when you walk out of your door, you're representing the station. If you're in a bar, you're at the grocery store, people are looking at you, they're looking at what you're doing, they're looking at who you're with, they're looking at what you're wearing. So it's kind of a 24-hour job, and you have to reserve space for yourself. I learned that from Shop too.
And let me follow that up because, I noticed when I was in the newsroom with you that you were one of the people that was mentoring other people in the newsroom.
Yeah.
That's very important. Can you speak to that? The importance of being a newsroom mentor?
News is something that you learn how to do. No one is born knowing how to do it. Everybody learns how to do it. And one of the things that I took from the folks that I worked with, both in my first stint when I did the weather and the entertainment reporting, and it really wasn't on the news side, was I watched those people work, and what they believed in is what I'm going to say. Because that's what's most important, because the quality of the thinking, the quality of the writing, the quality of the analysis you do, the quality of examining your own biases and perhaps the biases of other people, the quality of the work matters. So it's important for me when I'm in the newsroom to share that with others, because my number one job as an anchor is to keep my producers and my reporters from making me look stupid. That's kind of a goof, but you know what I mean? Honestly, if I'm the guy who's spitting this, I don't want garbage copy from somebody who doesn't know how to put some sentences together. I don't want a story that's incorrect, because people will look at me and blame me for it. So the quality of my staff always reflects on me, and I want it to be high, and I try to share with everybody what I know. And the idea that news is not just a commodity. It's not just some butter that you can buy in the store. It is something that matters to the functioning of our democracy and our evolving society. And when news is done poorly, and when news is done without consideration, proper consideration, it is a detriment to our society and a detriment to progress.
So what was your learning experience like? 32 years?
Oh man, 32. Well, first of all, I have been allowed to make mistakes that got other people fired repeatedly. Let me tell you one of them. We used to do a top 5 at 9. Top 5 at 9 countdown. So every night, the hottest songs of the day, blah, blah, blah. It was a Friday night. I don't know, you guys don't know this group. There was a group called Brand Nubian that had a song called Slow Down. And it was all in the wake of the crack epidemic, a not flattering song about people who were hooked on crack. But it was a nice rap, and it was funny. So another DJ calls me up on the warm line. I pick it up. Eric, what's happening? Hey, Juan, what are you doing tonight? I don't know, man. What you into? What are you playing? Oh, Brand Nubian, Slow Down. Bam, 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 bam. So we start singing to each other over the phone the real lyrics to the song that people are hearing in the edited version, and it's all going out on the air because I didn't know that he was live with me on the phone. Another phone rings. Hey, what's up? Juan, do you know everything that you're saying is going out on the air? Shit! That went out too. So Friday night, 9 o'clock, hot time, I've done a wonderful thing, singing the explicit lyrics to a dirty song, followed by cursing at the person who notified me about that. And they didn't fire me. Monday, my boss did call me in and say, hey, I heard something happened on Friday night. I was like, yeah, it happened. And it did. But I mean, even on television, I didn't make mistakes that way, but I think just learning how to be comfortable on air takes a long time. It took me a long time. Are you guys familiar with Malcolm Gladwell's concept of 10,000 hours? The idea is this. For you to be an expert at anything, at being a violinist or being a writer or being a sculptor, whatever, you need to devote 10,000 hours to that task. And it took me about 9 years before I really felt comfortable on TV going to do that show. And not without pre-show nerves, but just that so many things had gone wrong by that point, there were no more surprises for me. So I was always able to handle it and never really freaked out. And when you're relaxed and comfortable, you read better. And I say better, meaning like for meaning and staying connected to the story that you're talking about. So I made a million mistakes and been forgiven for most of them. And that's really the fine character of my career. Fred Astaire, Fred Astaire said something to the effect of, if you're in a business long enough and people still have you around, the mistakes you make become your style. You know, the little thing that you might not do the same way as everybody else, you get credit for instead of being pointed out. And I've been lucky enough to have that happen. You're doing good with no notes or anything like that. I like that.
Off the top.
Do you think that the media market here in Richmond has enough representation of all voices, meaning Black, Hispanic, Latinx, LGBTQIA, Asian American, et cetera? And if not, what do we need to do in this market to make that happen?
That's a long list, right?
Yeah.
So there's only a finite amount of time on the news, even though they're doing work than ever.
And it's whether it's people reporting the news or representing stories
I think
for
that
those people.
people will argue with me. There is more representation of people of color in the local market than ever before.
What are we doing enough?
Let me continue. So your forward-facing sort of stuff is better than before. Perfect? No, never. Because honestly, to expect anybody to do exactly proportional representation of every single group that needs to be represented is a little bit much to ask, and maybe impractical, right? So the idea is that you want to provide the widest possible set of views. News is a corporate product for the most part, and it comes with corporate sort of constraints. So I think that those companies are aware that diversity helps to sell their product, so they're interested in it. They are less interested, I think, in general, and I'm talking about industry-wide now, in representing, and stay with me. The problem is not so much for me, in the representation of people vis-a-vis ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identification, elderliness, family status, any of that. The biggest problem or the biggest issue for me is a lack of representation of economic situations and economic class. Rarely do you see a story on the news that is focused on the perspective of the poor person, of the have-not. You're talking to people who are business leaders, who are industry leaders, who are military leaders, political leaders. Even the folks that you hear from in sound bites are generally not from but a few social classes. And I think that matters a lot more for me, or as much as anything else, because that's the real divide in our country, in addition to divides of race, gender identity, what have you. The bigger thing is economics and where you are on the scale. And we rarely focus on stories about poor people. Let me make one example of this. We've been doing stories ever since pandemic relief hit about how we've had people on our air repeatedly saying that unemployment is unnaturally high because unemployment benefits are keeping lazy people from working. We have had a parade of business owners come through and say, well, if you just cut that off, people would come to work because they'd be forced to work. Rarely have we had somebody who said, hey, you know what? This money is keeping me and my 3 kids alive right now. And not only that, the job that I did have before was inadequate in 10 different ways. So of course I'm looking for something else. And the pandemic's an inflection point. I'm looking for something else. It's not, but we hardly ever have that perspective. And that is one I think is important because economics binds people as much, if not more, than race, generally.
I want to ask about your experiences speaking of racial things, especially with last year in the protest. I know that you have been on the news for a lot of the stuff that's been happening like 32 years is a long time.
Just 22 in the news, yeah.
Yes, 22 in the news. So all the experiences, how did you go about being unbiased and not showing emotion?
Oh, okay. There's a difference between showing emotion and being empathetic to the story that you're talking about. Okay, so no matter whether I'm talking about a fire or I'm talking about unemployment insurance, I try to be connected to the thing that I'm talking about. And that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm taking a side. It means that I'm connected to what I'm talking about. It's important that the most important thing for an ethical journalist to be aware of is not someone else's bias, but their own bias. I know where I'm biased. Well as I'm hopefully always discovering that. But yeah, being aware of your own bias is the number one thing, because then you can be sure that what's coming at you is not being filtered by you. And you can make a much more fair assessment about showing equally as much as you can what's going on. There's also a fallacy in the news business that it's possible to operate from on high without any bias whatsoever. And that's garbage, because every story has a teller and every teller has a point of view. No story has no point of view. What story is that? No book you read, no sentence you write, nothing you listen to. It's coming from someone. And that is an essential thing to remember as well.
What skill set do reporters lack when they first walk into a newsroom? This is when they're fresh out of college.
It's all about the words. It's all about the words. It's all about the words. It's the way you put the words together. It's the way, the sequence in which you put them together. If you're writing a newspaper article, you're looking for one thing in organization and presentation. If you're writing a 20-second script about a football team winning a game, it's another set. I am more disappointed in the writing that I see than anything else from people who are new. And that's not that you don't know the formula on how to write a news script, because you know the formula, you drill in the formula. But when you get into the real world, the people who are good, the people who excel, incorporate that knowledge and then build on it and go beyond it. Because anybody can, cookie cutter stuff doesn't really make it. The essence of the news is the word. Your story should be clear, concise, easy to understand, and have real information and context. Every single one, even if you're doing a story about a vaccination drive at VSU next week. So the writing is what gives me the most pause. Because clear writing is clear thinking. And that's what you should value most. The organization of ideas in a way that's great. Here's another little tidbit too. Most of the time in your writing class here at school, they will tell you, oh, the lead, you gotta put, the most important thing's gotta be first. If you don't say it first, then you're missing out. And they'll grade you that way. But as an anchor with 22 years on the desk, I'll tell you right now that if you're talking to somebody, what's a good example of this? Think about when you're angry at somebody and what construction feels the best? What construction gives you the most power? I keep looking at you because I'm still doing that. So you and I are having a beef. I don't like what you did. I think you treated her shabby. You should get out of here right now. The lead is that I told her to get out of here right now, right? But I said it last because people in their language build to that point. So in your first couple of lead sentences, sorry, you could really, I want the last thing to be at the end. You know, a house fire on the north side last night, 3 children are dead. 3 children killed in a house fire is what you guys are doing. And for me, I'll flip that all day because I don't want to say that. I want to say it so we're all agreed on what's important here. These children have perished in a fire. That's it.
I know that you did I would say like you were a counselor for a camp. I believe it's called H4.
What campus is it?
It was like H4.
Oh, 4-H, yeah.
4-H.
I was a 4-H'er as a kid. I went to 4-H camp and then worked 4-H here in town.
Yes.
Later.
So how did you implement what you just said about writing and teach those kids?
Oh, it was that assignment I had with 4-H was much more about video production and sort of stuff they were doing already. So it wasn't really a writing.
Okay.
It wasn't really a writing lesson. And all I really try to tell people who are getting in this business is a couple of things: is be the best writer you can, read as much as you can, know as much history as you can, because that gives you context in which to place events and people. And then also just really be aware that someone's always watching everything you do. That's how I got these jobs. People saw me out here hustling in the streets and they were like, hey, what about you? And I was like, thank you. There's no reason that can't be you too. Someone is always watching what you're doing. So always do your best. That's what your mom tells you. Hey, do the best you can every day. It's not a joke. Not for me. And it's carried me right here next to Rob.
Talk about newsroom conflict. Newsrooms can be very intense.
Yeah.
So talk to everybody here because, they've only been in classrooms. And
Yeah.
they've been, we do have there's insight here.
Yeah.
And we also have, I'm sorry, Alex, what is the capital news service?
Yeah,
Capital
oh, I
news
love that
service as
capital
well.
news service, great.
But tell them about what to expect in the newsroom and especially breaking news situations, snowstorms,
man.
all those things that are
Yeah.
so pleasant.
Yeah.
Election night,
Yeah.
Well,
I think that there's two separate things you're talking about. One is the challenge of doing a breaking news story or a severe weather event,
and then other
as
times,
opposed to,
there could be strife in a newsroom on a Tuesday.
but the stripe that you get in the newsroom is the stripe that you get if you were working at Hardee's.
Exactly.
If somebody you don't like is doing something you don't like and they're next to you, and like, would you please stop that? Or they're trying to take something that should be yours, or trying to squirt, trying to make you look bad in front of your boss. People don't become saints when they get into the news business, and some people are unpleasant. Some people really do have, anger management problems and things like that. So I can't really speak to that. I can speak to the conflict that should exist in a newsroom, in a good newsroom every day, about editorial decisions, about determining what is out there, what we should cover, and what matters to people who are watching. For this, I'll give you an example of a story that is relatively recent. We were debating in our afternoon meetings about whether or not to cover a city council hearing on the new police advisory board in Richmond, which was formed in the wake of the protest to evaluate police conduct across the board, just in the city, to provide accountability in the police department for abuses that officers might inflict upon citizens. They decided against the story because they felt like the meeting was going to be boring. But the reason they thought the meeting would be boring was ignored. The meeting was going to be boring because the police advisory board in the city of Richmond has no teeth. The story is not that the meeting is boring, we're not going to do it. The story is that we have a police advisory board in the city that doesn't have subpoena power. There's absolutely no juice, no real control or influence in the process. They have a meeting, they make a recommendation, it can be ignored, and everything is the same. You see what I'm saying here? That's the difference between, like, when you're talking about the story, where does it go? What depth are you talking about? You'll see a million stories here in town that for me are absolutely commercials. Commercials. Really, I've had young producers tell me that a story about a Walmart sale is a story. Well, and I asked them, I said, well, how is this a story? Well, it affects a lot of people. And I'm like, shoppers at Walmart? Shopping at Walmart? There really is, you do need to have ethics about your commercial concerns, things like that. So that's how I get to that.
Okay.
So you've been mentioning through this entire thing that people are always watching. So
Yeah.
what do you do?
I wear the worst clothes I can every day. I don't bathe, rarely brush my teeth. Can you tell?
Yeah.
She's being nice.
But what do you do differently, and what advice do you have for students to watch themselves?
I mean, wow. It's just about making good decisions. Nobody's perfect. Have I thrown up out of a car in the last 22 years because I was loaded? Probably, not recently, but I don't know. Try to make good decisions. That's all you can do. And that's up to everyone. But to maybe make the point more clear, it's important first to be, again, you have to be aware. If you don't have any self-awareness, then you're really lost to begin with. You have to be self-aware and self-driven, and you have to have an idea of who you are or who you want to become and behave in that sort of way. I don't know. I wonder if I'm going to be the same person now that I'm not in the TV business that I was before. In some ways, yes. Why not? It got me this far. I'm still going to be nice to people. I'm going to try to do my best all the time. I'm going to be friendly and bathe, brush my teeth, try to dress well. But does that mean, for me, the biggest change for me is not being in the news gives me a chance to be a citizen. Okay, not an observer, not someone who's supposed to be sort of impartial. I get to be a citizen now. So if there's a protest I want to go to, I can go to it. I can also run around the streets naked and act foolish and get arrested, right? without reflecting badly on my station. But is that good for me? No, I don't think my behavior is going to change a whole lot. The range of my participation in our city and society will change.
So you cannot like participate in like stuff that you believe in?
Hold on now. I couldn't participate in anything that was perceived as partisan or political because it would erode the confidence someone might have in my ability to pursue objectivity. Even though for me, some of these were clear moral issues that had very little gray area at all. Do you see? There's a difference there, right? You have, and I take that seriously. If you're going to be in this business, then you have to be in the business. And ethics is not a squirrely, wavy line. Ethics is a straight line. Either you're on the right side or you're not. You can debate that with people about what the right thing to do is, but there is a line, and I try to be on the right side of the line. It made me sleep easier, and I never had to worry about somebody trying to dox me and tell me that I was an agent of Antifa. What do you got on me? Nothing, because I'm walking the walk, you know.
Television media is probably set up the best moving forward in the digital age. What do you think is the most logical direction for TV media?
I don't know. It's too difficult a question. And I think that when I said that in the beginning of the talk, that the biggest change is the amount of news, the time we have to cover, the internet now. What you guys take for granted is the most radical technological change since trains in the 1800s. America is closer to that model of society than ever before, than never anytime since then. You know, where you have people who amassed enormous wealth with these technologies that we take for granted now, that are essential to our lives, that are basically unregulated. Never before, or not in anybody's lifetime here, has this happened now. And because you're in it, it's hard to see it. But if you look back, there are parallels. So I think the internet really throws a wrench to the game that I can't describe. Because, as you know, Rob was our digital director at the station, right? So are you promoting television or are you promoting internet? Are you using the TV to get the clicks or the clicks to get the TV? It's difficult to say, especially when the internet now includes, 5G and video is on your phone as well as anywhere else. Why do I gotta sit down on my couch, man? Got the BuzzFeed, I got this and that, I got the Salon, Slate, what have you, yeah. So I have no idea where it's going. I just know that without reflection and without an idea of what we are as a society, we will make bad decisions about those issues. There is very little discussion about what this all means and how we are being involved in it.
I want to ask, how has social media changed the way you did news before?
There's more work. The internet makes more work for you. It does. Now we have more shows than we had before, and you have to tweet, and you have to IG, and you have to Facebook, and people are on TikTok too, or whatever is next. It's like, I don't know, MySpace was the thing for a minute, and then it wasn't. LimeWire was a thing for a minute, and then it wasn't. Pets.com was a thing for a minute, then it wasn't. So who knows what's happening? But I do know that chasing these clicks, chasing likes, makes it much more difficult to work. Also, think about it. What is the internet runs on people being pissed off, right? It is. It's people getting fired up about stuff. This garbage, all that. So you write a screed. It's difficult to be a reporter, and again, perceived as or trying to be impartial or to protect against your own biases when you're in an environment where the loudest voices, the most radical voices are those that get the most attention. Oh yes. Like I said, I'm never going to work in this business again after this.
What was the hardest and easiest thing about walking away from the news?
It hasn't been long enough. It's been 2 weeks and 2 days. The hardest thing has to do with identity. for me, because I've been a main anchor at one of three. There's only three people in town who doesn't do my job, and I've outlasted the other two who started with. So, you know, being a news anchor is like an identity thing. So I don't know. I think the hardest thing is going to be finding again whether or not I want to run around the streets naked and get arrested. No. But yeah, finding a new equilibrium in my street life, because I don't, you know, I don't think I want to go crazy, but if there's a protest or a meeting that I want to go to, I can go. Also, schedule wise, like being a news anchor puts you in, at least if you're an evening anchor, it puts you into a night side thing. So I go to work around, you know, noon, 2 o'clock, get out at midnight every day. No happy hour, no dinner, no nothing. I was kind of off the grid, you know. Now I'm going to be integrated a lot more into what's happening in town, and quite happily. So I'm looking forward to that. The easiest thing about leaving, is that, you know, sometimes when you feel the ground shift beneath you, you know it's not a good place to stand anymore. And that's not a reflection on my former employers at all. They're doing the best they can with what they got every day, and my colleagues. Just for me, I think that it became, you know, something that I was less interested in doing because I'd done it for so long. It wasn't the way I remembered it, you know? You had an old ice cream store you like to go to and had a good old cone, right? Then you go back in 10, 20 years and they put ice milk in it now. It doesn't really taste as good. I'm not saying the news is ice milk, but it's not the same for me. And also, you know, you like colleagues die and stuff like that. And, you know, also, I think I fell into the news business, and quite happily, it's, you know, I've made a lot of money and made a lot of friends, and hopefully acquitted myself well in our community and been an upstanding citizen. I'll leave it.
So on your last show, you said that you're not retiring.
Yeah, no, it's a lie. I got to work.
So I want to know what you're doing next, and when do you plan to retire?
Okay, I'm gonna have to work until I'm dead because I spent too much money, didn't save. So another lesson to y'all is save some of that money, whatever it is, 10%, just forget about it. It's best to have direct deposit, to have two accounts, and just have one where the other money goes so you don't even see it. Because if I see it, I spend it. Slush fund, exactly. That'd be my biggest thing. Because if I had saved some of the money, I might be close to retirement. But I like work. It keeps me going. I came here today from Charlottesville, where I took the state licensing exam to be a real estate agent, real estate salesperson. So I passed. Thank you very much. So yeah, I'm going to pursue commercial real estate development and investment here in town with a buddy of mine who I've known since I was a kid, who's been a broker in town. I'm also going to, while that is kind of coming to fruition, it could be a couple of months, a couple of years, who knows. I'm also going to go back to on-camera talent and voiceover talent stuff outside of the Richmond market. I have a non-compete with my old station that lasts a year. I can't appear in any commercial TV station, commercial advertising, anything like that for 12 months. So I'll try to make some money out of the market doing that stuff. There's also a lot of work in industrial films, like training films and things. So I'm going to keep a little bit of my old identity and then try something new. What I was going to say before is that part of the reason it's easy to leave is because I fell into news and now I'm directing myself into something. This is my choice to try to be in commercial real estate. Do you know what I mean? It's something that I decided. It's not something I fell into. It's like, oh man, it's too good to leave. I got to hang out here. Now it's like I'm actually going to act with some volition and do what I want. Much in the way you guys are. You're training to be journalists. You want to be journalists. I've trained to be a real estate agent, and
So if I get a job at a Starbucks, you might be the.
Oh, I'm heavy on the phone. I'm going to be the phone guy.
I'm going to be watching a training film that's going to. Here will be one.
No.
Here's how you build a latte.
No, Rob. No. I'm going to be serving you the coffee. That's really, man. And honestly, I goof about it. There is honor and dignity in work of all kinds. So if I have to be at your KFC drive-thru, you're going to get some good service from me because that's how I operate.
So you were in the biz for 22 years. Impactful event that you covered or that you announced, and your favorite event.
Oh man, there's no favorite. Gosh, I don't know. You know, the
I know
favorite,
that's like saying,
my-
picking your favorite kid.
my favorite, yeah, it is too hard to pick your favorite kid. The thing that's brought me the most joy, I think, on air is watching good people be on TV. I've watched some really talented people do amazing things and stories that are hard and difficult to understand, that they get to the crux of it. Man, they'll never let you do it again. There was a dude I used to work with named Richard Real. Richard Real was a fantastic reporter. He was an armed forces anchor for many years and then got into local news. So Real could do a story about politics. Politics was his real beat, right? Real could do a story about politics and do a 30-second or a 45-second stand-up, literally walking up the street, just telling you the story. Senator Stoley's, but his whole thing was just like, you couldn't stop watching. So watching people like Richard, man, you just feel good about that. It's great to watch because these people are talented and they're doing amazing things. Also a cat named Jonathan Costin, who works here in town. One of many crazy things. Jonathan Costin, we sent him to the state fair and he did about 2 or 3 minutes arguing with a Greek guy who's selling euros about the pronunciation of gyro. It was hilarious. So watching people do good work really makes me happy. And people in the news are good, it's a bunch of smart people in a room together, a lot of great jokes. Everybody, a lot of people are good looking. You can't get away from that. It's like, they let me in here. It's cool. So I think that's what I'll miss. Those are high points. Story-wise, I've been thinking about it. It hasn't been very long. I mean, 9/11 was big, but 9/11 was a distant story for us because the closest thing was to the Pentagon. So it affected us directly, but also indirectly. The sniper shootings, I think, are a good one. Because I can't tell you what it's like. Everybody in this area, everybody who lived from, I don't know, through Delmarva down to here, was worried about pumping gas because people were getting shot when they were pumping gas out of nowhere. Can you imagine? So everybody literally is at gas pumps like this, looking behind, looking for a white van that didn't exist. Also, that story resonates for me because I think I was able to figure out part of the story that I didn't see anybody else do. At the time, the state police superintendent was a guy named Gerald Massengill, Colonel Gerald Massengill, old school dude. They had recently started putting up planes in Northern Virginia and in the DC area that could triangulate through audio the position of shots that were fired. So they told everybody, well, we have planes up now, so when the shooting starts, we'll be able to pinpoint with almost, accuracy exactly where it came from. And I asked Massengill, I said, do you think that the presence of spotter planes that can triangulate the sound of shots in the DC area will drive the snipers south? Nope, he said. And a week later, somebody got shot at the Ponderosa in Ashland, where there were no spotter planes to triangulate the sound of the shots. So I don't know if I predicted what was going to happen, but I felt like it was a great question, and I'm proud that I thought of it. So that strikes me also. Good job, Juan.
I want to ask about your fan base because I know that you had a lot of fans. I watched a video of you on Facebook after you hurt your arm.
Yeah.
And there were so many people supporting you. How was it leaving that? And how was it like during the time building it up?
It's very humbling. It's very humbling to have people be nice to you for no reason at all. Really, it's humbling. People are like, oh, you're awesome. That's all I want you. And part of that's just being on TV, man. TV confers authority. TV confers acceptance. TV is sort of like, well, everybody wants to be on TV because if you're on TV, you made it, right? So people have treated me far better than I deserve. But with that, I think I've also tried to, I talked about this maybe, but I'm a placeholder. Whoever is in that anchor chair is the next person who has all this juice. So it's not really about me. It's about a chair, right? And that's a good way to keep your head about me too, because you can't breathe all that smoke and not get high. You can't. It's bad for you. You have to. It's bad for me. I can't operate like that. So I take it with a grain of salt, and I'm very grateful.
I think at this time, we're going to open up for the audience to ask some questions. Okay.
You talked about how like the party
opinion, the concept of like partisan bias, like affected, like whether it's like a protest or anything, does that type of concept like ever affect how you work in the newsroom? Like, where you call
Oh, sure. The question is, we're talking about bias and stuff, and the idea that you couldn't go to protest or participate in civil society to make the way you might want to because you're in the news business, and does that sort of translate to the newsroom? Yeah. Yeah, man, there are those, like I said, you're a good newsroom is a place where you're bouncing off all these ideas against the smartest people you can find. And people have different opinions about things. And some of these things are really on the margin, you know. A lot of it has to do with something is, in that case, like physical safety. How close are we going to let our reporters go? You know, people were spray painting our vehicles. One of our cameras got, spray painted in the lens. It's one thing to cover a story. It's one thing to send two people out, to a situation where they could be hurt or worse. I think that debate is really important. And I think that the reason that diversity is important in the newsroom is that, you have these perspectives that do not necessarily converge, but somehow have to be molded. And sensitive people, smart people can do that. That was a lousy answer. I'm sorry. I hope that's enough. Yeah. You're supposed to duke it out and have that conflict, but it's not about the people. It's not about the man who's in the chair, the girl who's in the chair, the woman who's in the chair. It's about the chair. What's happening with the thing itself.
Next.
Yes.
So since 2020, in regards to kind of the political landscape that's going on in the biases, in a lot of my classes, like we discuss the biases very often, especially in regards to political stuff. Despite, being politically involved, how do you kind of jump into the career by already having that back?
Okay. If you are a citizen of the United States of your age and your education, and you don't have some idea of what you think about what's going on, then you shouldn't be a journalist. Right? So cherish that. Cherish your ideas, cherish your opinion, cherish your ethos. Just be critical about it. And then, when you get into the news business, just be sure that you're aware of your own bias, so that when you talk to somebody who might not share your opinion, that you know what's happening. Also, the idea that just having an idea about that is not necessarily bias. We all have. It's not bad bias. Okay, it's just the way people are. I think that it's easy to conflate bias now because people use bias to attack each other. And again, I told you the words are important. People who control language control countries. People who control language control the world, because we make up our ideas out of these words, and the words matter a great deal. So yeah.
So let's say you have that political baggage already tied to your name. Are you able to get into the industry?
You tell me. In the media landscape now, you have everything from Newsmax to BuzzFeed to Democracy Now with Terry Gross. That's Terry Gross is on. Who does what's the woman who's on Democracy Now? The War and Peace Report. Amy Goodman. Yeah. So there's a place for everybody out there in the landscape. And if you feel like you want to be a partisan reporter, I don't want to say partisan, but at an outlet that has a point of view, that's okay.
There's a home
I
for
think
you. There's a home for you.
There's a home for you. And also, there are no media critics. I'm not talking about me, but media critics will tell you that some people will say that the current system of news, the current environment, system that we use for news is inadequate for our times. The AP's Capitol Hill reporter quit 2 weeks ago. The guy's been there forever and expert in American government and governance and the people who operate it. And he walked away because he said the climate after January 6th was one in which he felt he could do no good, where things were too far gone, where he could no longer, with conscience, be involved in what was happening. That's a terrible indictment of our situation now. So if you want to go out and get on your rooftop, get on your rooftop. I will insist that you be critical about what you're talking about and not just be spreading some yams, because that doesn't help anybody.
Other questions?
Yes.
You said you took acting classes. I wanted to know, is that something you would recommend?
Anything that you can do Yes, I would, because it's all, TV, again, we kind of conflate TV news with this ethereal sort of magical kingdom where everybody walks in and is shiny and okay. It's part of it is about the presentation and about being able to connect with material. And for me, acting classes helped me to turn words, helped me to learn how to present stories better, I think. And most acting is fiction. Flip it over to something that's real. And that was invaluable. But if part of it is like I'm a ham. I know this. I feel more comfortable doing this than almost anything else in my whole life. I knew that I wanted to do something like this. I was in 10th grade. I was in 9th grade. I was in a play in 9th grade in one high school. And here's how bad I was, right? It was a musical. And I had to sing the national anthem for my audition because I didn't have any other music. They gave me a part. It was a lot of fun. The next year I was in a bigger show at another high school and I did a number and it ended. And when you're on stage, you're looking out into darkness, right? Because you can't see the people, the lights are down, the lights are on you. And there was a moment's pause. I remember like yesterday. And then I did a good job, right? There was like a swell of applause. And it kind of washed over me. I was like, oh, I like this. And I was, ham when I was a kid, but that really kind of solidified that, oh, wow, man, I can do this. And the feedback feels good. So for me, it works. You're welcome. Yeah, the arts are good for everybody all the time. Don't whether you're a musician or whatever, the idea that you're expressing and performing something is good because you're going to be performing. But it's all about the word. You can be a great performer, but if you got shit script, then it's no good.
Other questions?
I have another question.
Yeah.
I want to ask, you talked about the change in news.
Yeah.
I want to talk about, do you think that you said that you not necessarily believing that the news is outdated, but do you think that news is going to change within the next 5 years to where it is in our date, or do you think that it's going to?
Very few things change without focus and consideration and a movement. So I don't know. I mean, things only change when people start complaining, right? I'm not sure what's going to happen. It's very difficult to talk about the future. I can tell you, again, that if we look at what's happening in a historical sort of context, 1880s, man, you remember the steel trusts? People who just cornered the entire steel market in the US, railroad magnates. There is incredible consolidation in the news industry, in the TV news industry. When I started, an insurance company owned my station, and it was one of 4 that they had. The company that owns the station now owns 215 stations. You guys must have taken Econ 101. What is the effect of an economy of scale? Well, okay, you have efficiencies in business. You have downward pressure on wages. You begin to control things that you could not control before, okay? And that is to make money, not to necessarily serve the public. So you have to think about it in that way as well, that the trend is towards consolidation. There are going to be efficiencies, and not efficiencies from my market to make my news better, efficiencies to the company, where when you have 215 stations, you can get one story from one reporter in Dubuque that's good and give it to everybody. Is that good for Richmond? Maybe, maybe not. But the point is that you would never have that before because we were focused on what we were doing individually as an entity and not as part of an octopus with 214 arms. Yes.
Are you talking about having news like this, like corporate type of business?
It's not a corporate type of business. It is a corporate business.
Yeah. Do you think, in your opinion, like there's a big difference between local, bigger news that broadcast more nationally?
I think you see the same parallels where, again, since 1980, when did CNN start? 80? Somewhere in there, right? So from CNN really pushed the boundary of what news could be. And now, because it makes money, you have 24-hour news stations with not enough news, which is why you get people yelling about things at each other and not really, and a lot of the stories aren't even about the things themselves. So that environment lends itself to information about what's next. Everybody's prognosticating. What's tomorrow's story going to be on this? I don't know. It's almost like in a rap battle or, some beef on the, then he said this to her. And she said, him. And does that really matter? I mean, if you follow those people, yeah, but in a greater context, no. What we care about, what cable news does, they cover the race and the people and the trials. Rarely do you see things about the issues, and rarely do you have perspectives outside of the ones that are generally accepted. Again, no poor people talking about issues on cable news. No one. You might have advocates for poor people, but they are few and far between, and certainly not focused because they detract from what's happening. And the idea is you want to keep it peppy, keep it moving, get the clicks, blah, 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 like this, got that. Follow us on, whatever. I think that there are parallels, but the idea that there is a lack of, we don't have any kind of ethos. Americans accept news, take it for granted what happens, and there's not a lot of reflection. We're worried about what's happening next and what's under our noses. It's not a good way to operate a lot of times. As an example, in some countries, the day before, I think in France, the day before an election, there is no news coverage allowed of the political campaign. So that there's a day, God forbid, of rest, of silence, of reflection, or at least a break from the blah, 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 blah. And that, many major religions will tell you, is the key to enlightenment and understanding. Quiet, meditation, prayer, what have you. It's an idea that you stop. And as a human being, quiet yourself and quiet your mind. I think it's a powerful example for what we should be doing in a lot of cases. Yes, did you have something? Oh, sorry, you did, yes.
Do you see parallels between, what's happening in broadcast and digital? It's kind of the same on both.
It's the tail wagging the dog, wagging the dog, wagging the dog. I mean, it really is. I think it's all tied up together in big money. And I mean, honestly, if you think about profit, because we're talking about big business, right? Google and Facebook take 80 or 90% of all the advertising budget, all the advertising money online goes to Google and Facebook, right? We're fighting for a small share of the pie and giving away the store to get it. I'm an old school dude, so it's hard for me to say. But again, I can't tell you where it's going.
Oh,
I have a question.
okay.
Yes.
So we know that there are some very real problems that the journalism industry faces.
Yeah.
But if you were to tell students why it's still worth going into this field, what would you say?
Oh, because without it, we are certainly lost. I'm bemoaning the quality, I think, but if there's any less of it, we're certainly no better off. So the idea is that people who are committed to telling stories is a good thing. And again, the discussion is not so. The discussion should not so much be with the individual people who are trying to pursue this as a career, but with us as a polity and as a nation to decide what matters to us, what doesn't matter to us, what is acceptable, and what is not. I can tell you this right now, that if you're going to be a journalist, right now, it's really difficult if somebody lies to you. If they lie to you, bold-faced, it's going to be really difficult for you to not say that's the other side of the story. People will it's not spin, it's a lie. I lie, and because you have to have two sides of everything, it's a false equivalence, right? You are required to say what I said, because even it's a lie, because you got to, otherwise you're biased. Well, you know what? I kind of feel like we need to talk about that. But that shouldn't stop people from getting into the business. That should inspire people to get into the business. And maybe not in traditional routes, but in ways that, again, advance our progress as a society and our place in the world. I'm not running for office. Yes.
What is your advice to journalists who's getting in the industry now and kind of carrying a lot of baggage from bias? Like, let's say you have a lot of biases tied to you. Yeah.
I thought you said vice. And I was like, are you talking about me? Yes, I
But you wanna
did.
be- but you
All my
wanna
crimes
be-
were on VHS. Nobody's seeing that business.
But yeah, like stuff from your past coming up, because I mean, as a generation, you know, we're
Don't
all
worry about it.
online.
Don't worry about it. Worry about what you're doing now. Because everybody has to answer for something.
Oh.
And I mean, listen, honestly, in 25 years, almost everyone in America is gonna have a nude picture somewhere they sent somebody, right, that can be hacked. So the presumption, yeah, I wouldn't worry about that at all. Any more than you do now. I mean, you can't erase it, right? No. Just try to be good and figure out where you want to go and how you do the things best that you want to.
All right, let's thank Juan for coming out.
Thank you. It's been a great pleasure. You guys asked good questions. I agreed to this, by the way, before I knew I was going to be like out, so it's odd to come and talk about this and not I talked to Rotary last Tuesday, so I'm not used to talking about things like this and not being in the business.
Yeah,
It's great to come out. Thank you.
it's good. I want to thank you guys for coming out. This is
Yeah.
the NABJ's first official event, right? So thank you for coming out. If you and
Oh,
the
SBJ,
SBJ, thank
very
you very
nice.
much for Alex bringing folks from the SBJ here. If you're interested in either organization, talk to Angelique. She's our vice president because I think Karen had to take off as one of your representatives here. And you can belong to both organizations because we want both these organizations to be very robust. So please, if you are not a member of either, please, get involved. We really want to get both these organizations to become very, very robust and very involved in the Robertson School. And thanks again for coming. Thank you, Juan, again for coming. Yeah, really appreciate
Pleasure,
it.
Rob. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Have a great week, great semester.
Bye, everybody at home. Don't forget, I'm going to commercial real estate. I'm not retiring.